The most extreme Brabus ever built did not begin with a boardroom, a wind tunnel, or some official Mercedes performance program. It began with a problem that sounds almost too small to matter. A young law student wanted to park his Porsche 911 outside his father's Mercedes-Benz dealership, and his father told him no. That was the spark, not a corporate strategy, not a racing department, not a billion-euro engineering plan. Just a sports car sitting in the wrong place, sending the wrong message, and a father telling his son to either drive a Mercedes or park somewhere else. So Bodo Buschmann sold the Porsche, bought a W116 S-Class, and instead of accepting that his new car was slower, heavier, softer, and more conservative, he decided to turn that elegant German luxury sedan into something that could chase the sports car he had been forced to give up. He lowered it. He changed the wheels and tires. He sharpened the way it drove. And suddenly, this quiet, comfortable S-Class had a completely different attitude. Customers noticed, people at the dealership noticed, and Bodo noticed something bigger than all of them. Nobody was really doing this. Nobody was taking Mercedes-Benz, the brand of bankers, executives, diplomats, and perfectly restrained German luxury, and turning it into something aggressive, outrageous, and genuinely fast. That is how the road to the most extreme Brabus ever built really starts. Not with a 900 horsepower monster, not with a record-setting sedan at 227 miles an hour, with one young man deciding that if he had to drive a Mercedes, he was going to make it embarrass the car he actually wanted. The year was 1977, and the place was Bottrop, West Germany, a hard-working industrial town in the Ruhr Valley that did not exactly look like the birthplace of a future performance empire. Bodo Buschmann was studying law, but his attention was clearly somewhere else. His parents owned a Mercedes-Benz dealership, which meant the family business had a certain image to protect. A Porsche parked out front was a bad look, so his father gave him the ultimatum that changed everything. Trade it in, or park somewhere else. On paper, choosing the S-Class looked like surrender. The W116 was the flagship Mercedes of its era, a machine built for smoothness, silence, status, and dignity. It was not built to feel rebellious. It was not built to make your pulse jump. It was the kind of car that seemed more likely to glide past a government building than attack a country road. But Bodo saw the gap. He understood that Mercedes already had comfort, quality, presence, and prestige. What it lacked was danger. It lacked the feeling that something expensive and proper could also be slightly unhinged. So while most people would have simply complained about losing the Porsche, Bodo turned the Mercedes into a personal project. And once customers started asking who had modified that S-Class, the frustration became a business idea. While he was still in law school, he decided to build a company around making Mercedes cars more powerful, more personal, and more exciting than the factory ever intended. Even the name Brabus came together in the most practical, almost accidental way possible. At the time, German law required 2 people to register a company, and Bodo did not have some grand co-founder waiting in the wings. He called a friend from law school, Klaus Brackmann, and asked him to sign the paperwork. Then they needed a name. No dramatic manifesto, no hidden racing code. They took the first 3 letters of Brackmann, B-R-A, and the first 3 letters of Buschmann, B-U-S, pushed them together, and created Brabus. That is it. One of the most intimidating names in the luxury performance world was basically made from 2 surnames and a legal requirement. And the funniest part is that Brackmann was not really interested in running a tuning shop. Shortly after the company was founded, he sold his half back to Bodo for 100 euros. Half of Brabus for 100 euros. In hindsight, that sounds absurd, because the company would eventually become worth hundreds of millions. But at the time, it was just a small idea operating behind a family dealership in Bottrop. That humble beginning matters because Brabus never grew like a normal factory performance brand. It grew one car at a time, one customer at a time, with Bodo proving that a Mercedes did not have to be polite. By 1982, only 5 years after the company started, Brabus was already installing televisions and multimedia systems into customer cars. In 1982, when a lot of households were still impressed by a VCR, Brabus customers could sit in the back of a Mercedes and watch TV. That detail tells you everything about the company's personality. It was never only about horsepower. It was about making a Mercedes feel ahead of its time, beyond factory limits, and almost ridiculous in the best possible way. That is why people misunderstand Brabus when they compare it to AMG. AMG also started as an outside tuner, and eventually Mercedes-Benz brought it inside the family, completing full ownership in 2005. So it is easy to assume Brabus followed the same path. Tune Mercedes cars, get famous, get bought, become official. But Brabus never took that deal. Even today, Brabus remains privately owned, controlled by the Buschmann family, Not by Mercedes-Benz, not by Daimler, and not by some giant corporate parent in Stuttgart. That single fact explains almost everything. AMG is performance from inside the Mercedes universe. It has Mercedes resources, Mercedes approval, Mercedes standards, Mercedes warranties, and Mercedes boundaries. That does not make AMG tame, because AMG has built some truly wild machines. But it does mean every AMG has to make sense as an official Mercedes product. Brabus lives outside that wall. Nobody at Mercedes headquarters has to approve the final idea. Nobody tells Brabus that a luxury sedan has gone too far. Nobody says a G-Wagon looks too aggressive, or a V12 makes too much power, or the interior is too outrageous. If a customer wants the most extreme version of a Mercedes, and Brabus believes the hardware can survive it, the answer is usually simple: build it. That independence is the difference between a performance division and a performance rebel. AMG is the wild older sibling who still lives in the family house. Brabus is the cousin who moved 3 towns away, built a private empire, and stopped asking permission from anyone. You can see that difference most clearly in the engines. AMG designs and builds performance engines as part of the Mercedes system, famously using the one-man, one-engine philosophy on many models, with a technician's signature plaque giving each motor a personal stamp. Brabus starts from a different place. It takes engines Mercedes already built, sometimes standard Mercedes engines, sometimes AMG engines, and then re-engineers them until the original factory output looks like the warm-up act. Bigger turbochargers, larger displacement using custom pistons and crankshafts, reworked cylinder heads, custom exhaust systems, rewritten engine electronics, stronger supporting hardware so the whole package can survive the extra force. The philosophy is brutally simple. Take something already powerful and extract everything the metal can physically handle. The Brabus Rocket 900 is the cleanest example. The Mercedes AMG S65 was already absurd, with a twin-turbo V12 making more than 600 horsepower from the factory. For most companies, that would be the headline. For Brabus, that was the starting line. They increased the engine from 6.0 liters to 6.3 liters, added larger turbochargers, built a custom exhaust, and pushed the result to 900 horsepower and 1,100 pound-feet of torque. That is not a mild tune. That is taking a luxury sedan that already seemed maxed out and asking a very Brabus question: what if this still is not enough? And that question is the heart of the brand. Mercedes gives you refinement. AMG gives you factory violence. Brabus looks at both and says, good, now move the limit again. But the most extreme Brabus cars are not just engine projects. That is another mistake beginners make. A full Brabus build is closer to coach building than simple tuning, because almost every part of the vehicle is reconsidered. The body gets wider and sharper. The wheels become custom forged pieces. The brakes are upgraded to match the new speed. The suspension is retuned so the car does not just make huge numbers on paper. The interior becomes its own world, with hand-stitched leather, custom materials, special colors, new trim, and details that can make a normal Mercedes cabin feel like the preview version. Brabus has its own carbon fiber production, its own upholstery workshop, and its own paint shop. That matters because the company is not merely bolting parts onto someone else's car. It is reshaping the vehicle until the Mercedes badge almost becomes a starting ingredient rather than the final identity. On some builds, the Brabus logo replaces the original star visually and emotionally, because by the time the car leaves Bottrop, it does not feel like something Mercedes simply forgot to build. It feels like something Mercedes probably could not build without scaring its own board members. And because Brabus is independent, it is not limited to Mercedes-Benz alone. It has built packages for smart cars, turning the tiny Fortwo from a city pod into a surprisingly quick little machine. It has built extreme Maybachs for customers who want luxury dialed past reason. It has even modified Porsches and Rolls-Royces for private clients. AMG will never tune a Porsche because AMG belongs to Mercedes. Brabus belongs to the Buschmann family, so its playground is as wide as the customer's imagination and budget. Still, the car that made the world really stop and stare was the Brabus Rocket, because that was the moment the philosophy turned into a record. In the mid-2000s, Brabus took the Mercedes CLS, a sleek four-door coupe with a back seat, a trunk, and the manners of an executive express, and gave it a heavily modified twin-turbo V12 from the Mercedes 600 family. They bored it out to more than 6.2 liters, added a custom crankshaft, forged pistons, larger turbochargers, and a completely rebuilt exhaust system. The final number was 730 horsepower, at a time when that figure sounded like exotic supercar territory, not something with rear doors and cup holders. Then Brabus took it to Nardo, the legendary high-speed test track in southern Italy, a giant circular proving ground where cars can run flat out for serious speed attempts. And there, this four-door Mercedes-based machine hit 225 miles per hour. It officially became the fastest sedan in the world. Then Brabus came back and pushed it even further, eventually reaching more than 227 miles per hour, faster than a Lamborghini Aventador in a sedan. That is the kind of sentence that barely sounds real until you understand who built it. Mercedes built the base, Brabus built the madness. And the company kept chasing that same idea with later rocket models. The Rocket 900, based on the S65, brought 900 horsepower into a full-size luxury sedan weighing more than 2 tons and could run from 0 to 60 in under 3.7 seconds. Brabus even built a Rocket 900 convertible, a 4-seat cabriolet that carried the same absurd spirit with the roof down. This is where Brabus becomes more than fast. It becomes theatrical. A Brabus rocket is not just transportation. It is a luxury car behaving like it is trying to break out of its own category. The empire around those cars is just as outrageous. Most people know Brabus because of the G-Wagon, and for good reason. A Brabus G-Class looks like a luxury bunker on wheels with huge fender flares, aggressive bumpers, forged wheels, carbon fiber, and a stance that makes a normal SUV look underdressed. Some versions push far beyond 700 horsepower, and the 6-wheel G63 6x6 became one of the most recognizable XS machines of the last decade. It was already wild for Mercedes, but Brabus treated 6 wheels as an invitation, not a warning. Yet the brand did not stop at land vehicles. Brabus built a marine division for high-performance boats and yachts. It moved into business jets, designing custom private aircraft interiors. It developed fashion and lifestyle products, putting the Brabus name on clothing and accessories. That might sound strange until you realize what Brabus has really been selling all along. Not just speed, not just tuning. Brabus sells the feeling that ordinary luxury is not enough. It sells the upgrade after the upgrade, the secret room behind the VIP room. The answer for the customer who looks at a flagship Mercedes, a Maybach, or a G-Wagon and says, yes, but I want the one nobody else has. That is why full Brabus transformations can cost well into 6 figures on top of the car itself. You are not buying a normal factory option package. You are buying exclusivity, theater, and a machine shaped around the idea that restraint is for other people. And when you understand that, AMG versus Brabus becomes easy. AMG asks, how do we make a Mercedes faster while keeping it inside the Mercedes family? Brabus asks, how far can we push this before it becomes something else entirely? That is what makes the most extreme Brabus ever built feel like the perfect ending to a very personal story. In April 2018, Bodo Buschmann passed away after an illness. He was 62 years old. The law student who was told his Porsche could not sit outside the family dealership had spent his life turning that insult into an identity. Control of the company passed to his son, Konstantin Buschmann, who became CEO and majority shareholder, and the most important part stayed unchanged. Brabus remained private, still family-owned, still independent, still sitting outside the Mercedes system, close enough to use Mercedes as a canvas, but far enough away to ignore the polite rules. So when you look at a Rocket 900, or a 207-mile-per-hour sedan, or a carbon-covered G-Wagon with enough power to embarrass actual sports cars, you are not just looking at a tuned Mercedes, you are looking at a grudge that learned engineering. A parking spot argument became a company. A forced trade from Porsche to Mercedes became a philosophy. A boring S-Class became proof that luxury did not have to be quiet. 50 years later, Brabus is still chasing that same feeling. Take the car everyone thinks they understand, then turn it into the version nobody expected. And that is why the wildest Brabus builds matter. They are not sensible. They are not subtle. They are not trying to please everybody. They are what happens when performance is separated from corporate permission and handed to people who think 600 horsepower is just where the conversation starts. So now the question goes to you. If you had to choose, are you Team AMG, the factory-backed performance legend, or Team Brabus, the independent rebel that refuses to stop at reasonable? Drop your pick in the comments, hit the like button if this story changed the way you look at that badge, and subscribe for more deep dives into the machines that look familiar from a distance but get completely wild once you know the story behind them.